4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff of the Falcon 9.
Spacecraft 1, separation confirmed. Spacecraft 4, separation confirmed.
Fifth Iridium satellite.
Spacecraft 7, 10, final spacecraft deployed.
Thank you, everyone. Awesome mission.
You are looking at a live view of the Falcon 9 rocket on the pad at our Vandenberg Air Force Base launch site as we prepare for liftoff a little over 15 minutes from now. Good morning from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. I'm John Isbrucker, the Falcon Principal Integration Engineer, and I'd like to welcome you to the webcast of the Iridium 8 mission. And a particularly special welcome to CEO Matt Desch and the nearly 250 Iridium guests who made the trip out west to watch today's launch. This is the final in a series of 8 launches for our customer Iridium to build their new satellite network, Iridium Next. Our first launch for Iridium was the Iridium 1 mission, which took place on January 14, 2017, almost 2 years from today. Now on this final mission, we're flying 10 Iridium Next satellites to join the 65 satellites previously placed in orbit by SpaceX. Today's launch is scheduled for 7:31 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or 15 hours 31 minutes Universal Time. Now, as you can see on the timeline bar at the bottom of the display, this is a long mission. Today's webcast will last over an hour. Now, following stage separation, we'll be attempting recovery of the first stage on our West Coast drone ship. Just read the instructions. Now for the music fans out there, Iridium has curated another special Spotify playlist to go along with today's launch. To play along at home, search for the Iridium 8 Launch Soundtrack playlist and get ready to start the playlist at exactly T-minus 12 minutes and 55 seconds before liftoff, just about 30 seconds from now. Now it's just past sunrise at our launch site, Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Air Force Base, a place where I worked years ago flying Titan IIIs. Now it's just a few hours up the coast from our headquarters here in Hawthorne, California. Now on the screen you can see the two-stage Falcon 9 vehicle on the pad. It stands 70 meters tall. That's over 21 stories in height. Now the first stage will provide the initial force to get Falcon 9 out of the majority of Earth's atmosphere. Now you can see in the first stage the soot. That indicates that this booster has flown before. It previously supported the Telstar 18 Vantage mission in September out of Cape Canaveral. So today will be the second flight of that first stage. Now about 2.5 minutes into flight, the first and second stages will separate. That happens right at the joint between that black part of the rocket and then the white second stage up at the very top. Once that happens, the first stage will be coming back. We're attempting to land the booster out at sea on our drone ship located about 250 kilometers downrange. Now from there, we'll follow the second stage as it takes the 10 Iridium Next satellites from the edge of space to their intended orbit. Now we'll see the first shutdown of the second stage. Then we're going to have a 43-minute coast phase before we relight the engine for a short burn, and that will then lead up to deployment of the Iridium satellites. Now those satellites are currently housed at the top of the rocket. You can see in the close-up the 17-foot diameter payload fairing with the Iridium Next 8 logo on it. Now for those of you who are wondering, there's no parachute on the fairing on this mission, so we won't be attempting fairing recovery this time around. But there still is a lot going on for this flight. Finally, the structure you can see, that truss structure next to the Falcon 9 rocket in white, that's the transporter erector. It carries the rocket from the hangar to the pad, and at about T-minus 15 hours, it raised it to the vertical position. That erector carries the plumbing and the electrical systems that are routed to the Falcon 9 and the Iridium satellites. Shortly before launch, at about T-minus 4 minutes, that erector will move 13 degrees away from the rocket. That's a little different than our East Coast launch pads that move away at liftoff. T-minus 10 minutes, 15 seconds, counting down. And as I like to report on the webcast, the good news, team is working no issues on the rocket. Falcon 9, we began loading propellants at T-minus 35 minutes. Currently, the second stage fuel tank is fully loaded with RP1 kerosene. Fueling is still going on the first stage. That'll finish about 6 minutes before launch. Liquid oxygen loading is underway on both the first and the second stage right now. Now our next major activity coming up in just under 3 minutes is opening the valves between the first stage propellant tanks and the engines. That allows us to chill the turbo pumps prior to the ignition sequence that starts in the last couple of seconds of the countdown. On the customer side, the Iridium team has transferred to internal power at T-minus 15 minutes. They're reporting no issues. They're monitoring the satellites, but they are ready for launch at 31 minutes after the hour. Today we're operating out of Vandenberg and flying over the Western Range. We get similar support for our Eastern Range launches. Today the Air Force is giving us clearance of both the air and the sea space, and they are providing weather support, launching the balloons we need to understand what's happening at the upper altitudes. And speaking of the weather, we all talk about it, but we only can wait and watch what happens with it. Currently, the upper altitude looks good. We are watching ground winds at the lower altitude at the launch pad site. I've been looking at that on my telemetry plot. We had a peak a little bit earlier, but the winds seem to be dying down a bit. But we're going to be watching that, especially as we retract the erector about 4.5 minutes from now. But currently, the weather looks like it's cooperating. Now, in order to correctly position the satellites, the SpaceX team has to launch right on time. So therefore, today's launch window is instantaneous. If we delay for any reason, We do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at 7:25 a.m. Pacific time. As many of you remember from our previous webcast, Iridium operates a network of 66 satellites in low Earth orbit. Now, including today's flight, we will have sent up enough satellites to replace the original 66, plus an additional 9 in-orbit spares, for a total of 75 Iridium Next satellites. Now in space, each Iridium Next satellite is cross-linked to 4 other satellites. That creates a dynamic mesh network that provides coverage over 100% of the Earth's surface. This network allows Iridium to deliver high-quality mobile voice and data coverage to the most remote edges of the planet, from the North and South Poles to the oceans and the airways. Iridium Next significantly enhances their ability to meet the growing demand for global mobile communications. Let's learn more about Iridium Next.
Life. It's about staying connected to your friends, your family, your business. Every generation has made their contribution to strengthening these connections. In the 1990s, the drive for truly global connections began with a vision that was as bold as it was audacious. The founders of Iridium set out to create a global network of satellites that would revolutionize communications, allowing people to connect to data, devices, and each other from anywhere on Earth. The first Iridium service launched in late 1998. Yet, like earlier communications, Iridium's original satellites needed to be refreshed to keep up with a growing and evolving demand. Iridium embarked on a $3 billion replacement of its global network. With a total of 66 operational satellites, this feat represented the largest technology refresh in history. Now, the countdown to Iridium's 8th and final launch begins. With this launch, Iridium will once again bring their initial bold and audacious vision to life. Because at Iridium, they know connections matter in every area of life, in ways we see and in ways we don't. That is the driving force behind Iridium. Partnering with the best companies throughout the world to enable the most innovative services and solutions possible and imaginable. It is their unwavering commitment to creating the most powerful multi-service broadband platform, Iridium Certus, a massively robust, reliable global service enabled by Iridium's pole-to-pole coverage that will empower people with products that will make a difference in our lives today and create a better world for everyone for generations to come. In the air, on water, and on land. With Iridium, now everything is within reach.
T-minus 4 minutes, 10 seconds, and we are continuing to count down for an on-time launch. We're currently pressurizing the second stage. We are opening up the clamp arms on the strongback and getting ready to recline away from the Falcon 9. That process will take about a minute. As you can see on the screen here, we're getting ready to move away. We have completed fuel loading on the first stage. We're continuing to load liquid oxygen on both first and second stage. That'll wrap up between T-minus 3 and T-minus 2 minutes. You can see now in the close-up the strongback moving away about 13 degrees from the rocket to get into the launch position. Now, as a reminder, at about 90 seconds before launch, we drain the propellants out of the lines that are in the erector. And when we do that, the liquid oxygen that we vent overboard will combine with the moist Vandenberg air, and you may see and hear a large white cloud come off the erector. That's normal. We expect that every time. Now, the Falcon 9, as I said, they're looking good, working no issues. The Iridium team, they are ready to go. The range reports that everything looks clear for launch, and the weather has continued to cooperate. The ground winds are high, but it looks like we're within limits, but we're going to be watching those all the way in the last few minutes here. But right now, everything looking good for an on-time launch just after 31 minutes after the hour. Now, as a reminder, we have a backup launch window. If anyone calls hold, 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 that backup is tomorrow, about 5 minutes earlier than today. But for now, everything looking good. We're going to listen and watch on the final minutes of the countdown of Falcon 9 with Iridium next.
Stage 2, locks, loads, closed out. Falcon 9 is on internal power. Falcon 9 is in startup.
This is Launch Director. Falcon 9, go for launch.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Vehicles configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff of Falcon 9.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
Stage 1 props nominal.
T plus 40 seconds and Falcon 9 is on its way with a countdown of the last 10 seconds by Iridium CEO Matt Desch. We're throttling down now in preparation for the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Vehicle supersonic.
Garcia on countdown 1, first motion time 15:31:33.492 UTC.
Calling out the time there of liftoff over the net.
Acquisition of signal.
We're through the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Merlin engines continuing to perform at 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Falcon 9 heading out into the upper atmosphere. Nice view from the first stage camera looking aft. We're headed south from Vandenberg Air Force Base, Space Launch Complex 4 East.
MVAC engine chill.
The MVAC engine cheer call out indicates that we have now opened up the oxygen that goes to the pump on the second stage engine, chilling it down for ignition, coming up about a minute from now. We're hearing good call outs. Propulsion looks nominal, the trajectory looks good. Now coming up will be rapid fire events. Main engine cutoff, we shut down the 9 Merlin 1D engines. At 2.5 minutes, we will separate the stages. We'll light the second stage engine, and at just a little bit after that, we'll relight 3 engines on the first stage to begin slowing it down for landing in the Pacific Ocean on our drone ship.
Stage separation confirmed. MVAC ignition. Stage 1 has entered its flip.
So we've had successful shutdown of the first stage. It's separated. It's doing the flip to reorient, and it's lit its 3 engines to begin slowing it down to come to the drone ship. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side of the display, second stage engine has ignited, begin propelling the Iridium satellites. You can see them there as we get ready for fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed. Stage 1 boost block shutdown.
A lot of events happening. You saw the fairing separate, and you can see one half of the fairing drifting away behind the second stage on the right-hand side of the display. On the left side, we've had shutdown from the boost back burn, and you can see the titanium grid fins slowly extending. That's nominal for those grid fins. The white flashing you see, that is attitude control gas, nitrogen, that's used to orient the first stage. We're coming up 4 minutes into flight. In about a minute and a half, the first stage will initiate a quick re-entry burn to again slow the rocket down as it re-enters Earth's atmosphere. A minute later, we'll perform the final burn, the landing burn, which will decelerate the vehicle to a gentle landing atop our drone ship. Just read the instructions. Now, as a reminder, recovery is always a secondary objective to our primary goal of delivering our customers' satellites to orbit. Views you have right now, the camera on the left is looking up the inner stage where there used to be a second stage. Now we're looking at the grid fins with the Pacific Ocean in the background. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, the MVAC-D second stage engine running about 200,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. You can see the nozzle glowing red hot. That's nominal for that nozzle. We're about half a minute away from the entry burn. This one will also be a 3-engine burn. That'll slow the vehicle down as we go to subsonic speeds, and then eventually a final burn a little bit after that to land on the drone ship. Getting excellent views as the sun has risen recently over the west coast here in the United States.
Stage 1 entry burn has started.
Call out the entry burn on stage 1 has started. 3 engines up and running.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And the entry burn shut down called out over the countdown net, as you heard.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Everything continuing to look good. First stage entry burn has ended. We're less than a minute until the third and final landing burn, followed by touchdown on the drone ship. And you can see the first stage descending back down through the atmosphere as it's coming up on the cloud deck. Now, as a reminder, we may lose live video coverage on the drone ship is the engine exhaust degrades the radio frequency signal. Now, if that happens, we'll share status updates on the first stage as they become available.
Drone ship AOS.
Drone ship AOS means the drone ship has acquired the signal.
Landing burn has started.
Center engine has lit. We're slowing ourselves down, preparing to find the drone ship right underneath us. You've got the camera view from the drone ship now. Waiting to see the first stage come into view. And we're getting the signal dropout, which is not unusual. We're gonna keep pressing on. We have not heard confirmation.
Falcon 9 has landed. Landing operators moving to 11.1 on
There you go. We heard the call out from recovery. Falcon 9 has landed. We hope to get a shot of it on the deck of the drone ship a little bit later, but we can confirm we're down with the first stage. We're pressing on the second stage mission. Currently, trajectory looks good. We've begun throttling down the Merlin vacuum engine, maintaining the G load on the Iridium Next satellites. And we've got the view back from this drone ship. There it is, right in the middle of the bullseye. The first stage is back again down on Earth. Meanwhile, second stage is getting ready in less than 20 seconds for shutdown and entry into the parking orbit.
Stage 2 FTS is safe.
Coming up on shutdown of the second stage engine, and we've had shutdown.
MVAC shutdown.
Now we're going to wait for the guidance officer to give us a report on the orbit.
What's the signal, Hawthorne, as expected?
Looking up right now.
Nominal orbit insertion.
It sounds like we have a good orbit insertion. Looking at apogee, perigee, inclination, everything's looking good. So we're 9.5 minutes into flight. We've got a satisfactory parking orbit. We're now going to go into a coast phase. This is about a 43-minute period while we coast over to Africa, where we will then relight the upper stage engine and then eventually deploy the 10 Iridium Next satellites. So we're going to halt live commentary right now. Going to take a break. We'll be back, though, at T plus 50 minutes to continuing coverage of the Falcon 9 mission for Iridium 8.
signal control. Acquisition of signal, South Africa. Acquisition of signal, Mauritius.
Welcome back. It's just past T plus 50 minutes and 10 seconds since liftoff of the Falcon 9 carrying the 10 Iridium Next satellites. Broadcasting to you today from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, and on the screen, you're getting one of the periodic views we've had as we've been going through the coast phase of one of the Iridium satellites on top of the Falcon second stage. Now, so far today, we had an on-time launch. Weather looked a little iffy, but the ground winds died down. We launched right on time. First stage did a beautiful landing on the drone ship. Second stage has completed one burn into the desired parking orbit. We're now preparing for a short relight of the upper stage engine in about a minute from now. Now, this second burn is much shorter than the first. It only takes just under 4 seconds to raise the required Iridium orbit to the final altitude. Now, the ignition is called SES2, the second stage engine start number 2. Then we will have the second stage engine cutoff number 2, or SECO2. Now, following SECO2, we will then begin deployment of the 10 Iridium Next satellites, starting at about T plus 56 minutes and 58 seconds. So just before T plus 57 minutes, we release them one at a time, about every 100 seconds. And we'll be bringing you that. But right now, we're going to wait for ignition of the second stage engine coming up in about 15 seconds. Now, currently, second stage is doing settling pulses, making sure the propellant's at the bottom of the tank, ready to support ignition. We've had ignition and we've had shutdown. And it looks like
nominal orbit insertion.
We have a nominal orbit insertion, waiting for the guidance officer to call it out. So the second burn is complete. We've got the Iridium satellites still mounted to Falcon 9, right where we want them, into the final orbit. So now we've got about 5 minutes until the first of the 10 Iridium satellite deployments. There's a view once again looking forward from the second stage camera at the Iridium satellites. We're going to resume commentary at T plus 56 minutes and carry you through the deployment of the 10 Iridium Next satellites. Welcome back. We're setting up for the deployment of the first of the 10 Iridium Next satellites in just under 1 minute from now. Now the camera right now is switched back. We're looking at the MVAC-D nozzle on the second stage. We're currently passing over the island of Madagascar. We're flying north. We'll pass over the Horn of Africa and then up over Central Europe. We are moving into the terminator, so the views will be a little difficult. We're out of the light of the sun to the most part, and we are also illuminating with a small lens or a small flashlight that's mounted on the second stage. Now we're coming up on separation of the first satellite. You might just see it at the very top of the screen moving through the frame. The Iridium satellites are stacked in 2 levels. Let's wait for the call out.
Spacecraft separation confirmed.
And you can see a little bit of activity. The first of the 10 Iridium Next satellites has deployed. As I was starting to say, the Iridium satellites are stacked in 2 levels. So there are 5 satellites on the top tier and then 5 satellites on the bottom tier. So the first 5 that we release are off of the top. They're farther away from the payload attached fitting camera, and not all of them are in the field of view. So some of them we'll get to see, some of them will be out of sight from the camera and we'll only hear the call out. But the good news, satellite number 1 is separated on its way. We've got 9 to go, and we're about a minute away from the second satellite. We'll be back then with the separation.
Also signal South Africa as expected.
Okay, we're getting ready in about 6 seconds for deployment of the second satellite.
Payload separation confirmed.
And I was a little behind on my call there. We have confirmation of payload separation. Fortunately, it looks like it was a little bit outside of the field of view of the camera, so we only heard the call out from the avionics engineer. 2 down and 8 more to go. As I mentioned, these are released every 100 seconds. Commands from the second stage flight computer go to the release system that deploys the Iridium satellites off of the SpaceX built dispenser that's mounted on top of the second stage. For the next deployment.
Satellite deploy confirmed.
The third of the 10 Iridium Next satellites successfully deployed. That one's out of field of view of the camera. You can't see it, but we did hear the call out. We see it on telemetry. Now currently SpaceX's second stage passing over a series of ground stations. We've been using South Africa. We're using Mauritius. We're coming up on Dubai. We just lost contact as expected with Mauritius. So we're handing off So we may or may not have live video as we come up to this next separation, as we're in the middle of the handoff between the African ground stations and the Dubai ground station.
Acquisition of signal, Dubai.
And we've got signal through the Dubai ground station. Satellite number 4, this should be a good one if my numbers are correct. We ought to be able to see that one come off in the field of view of the camera.
Payload has separated.
And there we've got a nice visual confirmation. Separation of the 4th of the 10 Iridium Next satellites. Like clockwork, on to the 5th one in 100 seconds. For those wondering, the view of the MVAC-D engine on the night side of the Earth, off of one of the drain lines, you can see that white formation. That's solid oxygen. That's what oxygen looks like when it's frozen. It's actually fairly fluffy. It's not icy or hard, and you'll see that come off of second stage drain lines every now and then during our webcasts. About 10 seconds until deployment of the 5th satellite. This one won't be in the field of view. We'll only get call out from telemetry indication.
Payload deploy confirmed.
And what we love to hear, payload deploy confirmed. That's the 5th of the 5 satellites on the upper tier. We now concentrate on the 5 satellites that are surrounding the dispenser on the lower half of the stack of what was originally 10 Iridium satellites. Now we're down to 5 to go. Coming up on deployment of the 6th Iridium Next satellite, we might be able to see this one out of the corner.
Satellite separation confirmed.
And we actually had a pretty good view there of the 6th Iridium satellite deploying off of the dispenser, mounted on top of the Falcon 9 second stage. Everything continued to go well on the timeline. 6 down, 4 to go, 100 seconds until the next satellite deployment.
Also signal Melindy as expected.
We're inside 10 seconds now to the next deployment. Again, this one is probably going to be out of the field of view. Camera is a little too zoomed in to see it, but it'd just be below the satellite that you're looking at.
Spacecraft has separated.
Confirmation of separation, we can see it in the brake wire telemetry. So we've got 7 down, 3 to go, so with just 5 minutes to go in the deployment sequence. Okay, we're about 10 seconds away from separation from the 8th of the 10 Iridium Next satellites. This one's out of view of the camera. It's on the backside of the dispenser.
Spacecraft deploy confirmed.
But even though we can't see it, we can hear it. As the avionics engineer confirms that the satellite has been successfully deployed. 8 down, we've got just 2 to go. Just over 30 seconds away from deployment of the 9th satellite. A word about this one. This one should be the one that I like to see. It's the one right in front of the payload attach fitting camera. And if you'll notice, it says SV10 underneath it in white letters. This is the 9th one to separate. The numbering that is stenciled onto the vehicle is different than the order that we separate in. So don't worry when number 9 separates and you're going, why is it labeled number 10?
Satellite has separated.
Oh yeah, nice view. Satellite number 9 has separated. We're down to 1 to go. We're coming up about 10 seconds to go for deployment of the 10th satellite on this, the Iridium 8 mission.
Final Iridium satellite separation confirmed.
And you've heard the call out. Final Iridium satellite separation. And that's not only 10 for 10 today, but that's 75 for 75. It's been a clean sweep for Iridium and Falcon 9. That's going to bring an end to our webcast, and it's been a great webcast. Falcon 9, we had sunrise, we saw the rocket countdown, launched right on time. Beautiful views from the onboard cameras. First stage, landed on the drone chip right on the X. Second stage went into the first orbit, it was a very nominal orbit. We relit the engine. Second orbit was an excellent one. And just now you've watched with us over the last 15 minutes or so as we've deployed all 10 of the Iridium Next satellites, completing 75 satellites on orbit for the new generation of Iridium capability from space. Now we'd like to thank the United States Air Force for their range support today, and our licensing agency, the Federal Aviation Administration. And a special thanks to our Iridium customer for 8 great launches over the past 2 years. When Iridium and SpaceX entered this agreement, it was, at the time, the largest single commercial satellite deal ever signed. So it's been exciting to support these launches and a true honor to be Iridium's launch provider. Thanks, Iridium, and thanks to those watching, and have a great day. Falcon 9 team is conducting the countdown, working no significant issues. We're on schedule for an on-time launch.
Rock, RC, countdown 1.
Rock.
Verify range is green and go for launch.
Range is green.
F9 is in startup.
LD, go for launch.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff of the Falcon 9.
SpaceX has always been a can-do kind of company. That's the way Iridium is too, and it seems like the right kind of match.